Who are we, Anthony?
You are Calvary Chapel Baptist Church. It's a small family church in Gloucester.
Calvary Baptist.
So they actually have in their church, they have as a ministry a little like primary elementary middle school. And I taught there for a semester math. And so anyway, I know a lot of people in the congregation, and I went and preached there last month and tried to preach.
Who's the pastor?
Pastor, his name is Tim, don't know his last name. Young guy.
All right. Here we go. Calvary Baptist, Gloucester.
The day will come, or maybe the day's already here. It's the day of trouble. At the day of trouble, the time of trial, the season of suffering. Maybe it's something that comes from a diagnosis from a doctor. It's cancer. Maybe it's the waking up in the morning and the bag's packed. Your spouse has packed your bags, ready to leave. Maybe it's the agony of watching day in and day out your son or your daughter suffer from an illness, from emotional turmoil. Maybe it's your own dreams that have been lost. Maybe it's watching someone that you love battle with addiction. This is the day of trouble. This is the time of trial. This is the season of suffering. And what we see in Psalm 77 is we see Asaph go through his day of trouble. And he's answering a question, an important question for us. How do we honor God in our day of trouble? How do we remember the Lord in our day of trouble? And so Psalm 77, verses 1 through 3 starts. And the first point that Asaph makes is, we remember the Lord even when it is tiring. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. When I remember God, I moan. In other words, when I remember God, I murmur in discouragement. The psalmist is discouraged. The psalmist is tired. He's distressed. Can you imagine you receive the diagnosis and say, and I can tell you, it's cancer. Or you wake up in the morning, you see your spouse's bags packed. Or you get the letter in the mail from the university that you've been applying to, your dream place, and again, we are sorry to inform you. And you read it, and right away, what happens? All these thoughts flood your mind. All these feelings, this pit in your stomach of anxiety. And in that time, it's so hard to direct our thoughts, to decide to say, I'm going to think about the Lord now. When your mind is flooded with, well, what am I going to do? Well, what's going to happen? Well, how is this going to play out? All these things start to come to your mind. It's hard to direct your thoughts to the Lord. And yet what we see in Asaph is he remembers the Lord even when it is tiring. That's what we do. We remember the Lord even when it is tiring. And sometimes when we're so tired, when we're crying out, when we're remembering the Lord, when we're so tired, sometimes we become so tired that our voice gives way. And we become silent as we experience the silence of God. And so Asaph himself, experiences this silence, and it brings us to our second thing, that first he was remembering the Lord even when it is tiring. And now we remember the Lord even in the silence and the doubt. Verse 4, you hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? I remember one time, one of my days of trouble, one of my times of trial, one of my seasons of suffering, was actually came right after this period of time where I was most happy in my life. It was a time of preparing for a wedding, my wedding. And me and the woman who I loved, who I've known for years, were so excited, so happy. It was such an incredible process. It was just love. The whole thing was just lovely. The process of picking out a ring and going through the preparation process and dreaming and enjoying that dreaming process. Until one day, you hear the words, I don't want to marry you anymore. And those were some of the hardest words I've ever had to hear. And a period of time where after that, it became tiring as I was anxious and not able to eat for days on end out of that pit, that anxiety that I felt. It was hard to direct my thoughts to God. But I also remember the silence. I remember the time of silence. I remember the time of doubt. I remember thinking, God, why did you watch me get so excited, so happy, so joyful, just to watch me crushed? And I remember this is the experience that Asaph had when he's hears the silence of God and he's silent before God. And now all these questions come to mind. Look at these questions that come to mind. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be faithful? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? And this isn't just Asaph, this isn't just me, this isn't just many of you. Jesus on the cross had the same experience. My God, why have you forsaken me? And this is the feeling of the psalmist. This is the feeling that we have in our day of trouble. And we remember the Lord, even in our silence, even in the doubt. And as we consider, and as we sit in our pain, and as we continue to remember the Lord, something starts to happen. Something beautiful starts to arise in our hearts. We start to remember something of utmost importance. We start to see God in our day of trouble. And we start to remember that the Lord is still working. Verse 10. Then I said, I will appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. You, with your arm, redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Do you notice something? The psalmist goes from past to present. I was thinking about the things you did in the past, your wonders of old, the times beforehand, the ancient times. You are the God of wonders. The psalmist goes from past to present. He starts to see God was in the past, God is in the present. But there's another shift. He also makes this shift. From I to you, from me to he. I will ponder all your work. I will think about, I will consider, I will meditate. You are the God who does wonders. You, with your hand, redeemed your people. You. And see, this is a thing that happens in the midst of trouble. in our day of trouble, it's like we get drawn in and kind of enveloped by the trouble. It's like all of a sudden it's all we can see. It's like us, me, I, and my trouble become the main character, and God is just the extra in the background. They're like that blurry background in the back in your Zoom calls, and God becomes or the pain becomes the front and center thing that we see in our day of trouble. And at some point or another, as we remember the Lord, even in the silence and the doubt, even when it is tiring, something arises where we start to see God. And we start to be more God-focused in our day of trouble because we see Him. We see Him, we remember that the Lord is still working. So it's like God now becomes the main character. He becomes front and center, and our pain and us ourselves take a back seat. And this is what Asaph was experiencing. In verses 16 to 20, which I'm not going to read right now, but in 16 to 20, he starts to reflect on the Red Sea experience. He starts experience on the Exodus. He starts to think about God's people coming up to the Red Sea, a dead end, and God meeting them in this time of distress in their day of trouble and splitting open the Red Sea and allowing them to walk on dry ground. He's talking as if he's there. And we too remember the story of the Exodus. You remember in Exodus 2, God's people crying aloud to God. Does that sound like our passage a little bit? Crying aloud to God, and God hearing, and God coming to the rescue. That's what we see when we look at the Exodus, just like Asaph. But not just the Exodus, we look at an even greater deliverance. When we look at the cross, we see God's great deliverance. We see God's great love. We see God still at work. Before I even made a mistake, He was thinking about me. Before your day of trouble ever came to be, God was already thinking about you and already showing His love for you on the cross. When we think about the cross, we remember the Lord, and we remember that the Lord is still at work. He is still working. So we might be asking, how? How do we remember the Lord in our day of trouble? How do we remember the Lord in our time of trial and our season of suffering? How do we remember the Lord? Here's just a couple of suggestions. One is to journal, to write down the things that the Lord has done. For me, this is I like this exercise of just going into my room. I have 10 years worth of journals piled up in my room, just picking out a random year and just looking. Wow, Lord, look at what you've done in my life. So that would be one. Write out the things that God is doing in your life so that you can keep track of it throughout your time in your life. The second thing is to, through worship. Through worship, we posture our hearts so that God is number one in our life. We stir up our affections towards Him. So that's two, is worship. Another suggestion that I have is to have a dedicated prayer life, a dynamic prayer life, a time that's special to you where you actually go and you spend time with God. For me, it's walking in the morning and praying. That's my time with God. That's a time that grounds me when life feels shaky. Another thing that I suggest is to have a group of people that you can talk to and you can be honest with. People that you know that you can go to in your day of trouble. And they're going to pray with you. They're going to listen to you. They're going to care for you, just like you care for them. In conclusion, we see in our day of trouble, we remember the Lord, even when it is tiring. We remember the Lord, even in the silence of the doubt. And we remember the Lord. And we remember that the Lord is still working. In your day of trouble, remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Your time?
13:25.
Oh, you said a lot in 13 minutes and 25 seconds.